You can find that on page 1777 of today's calendar. So welcome, Representative Murwicki.
Thank you. For the record, Representative Murwicki from the Wyndham 4 District. Really easy. This is a simple little thing, although it took a lot of discussion to get to this point. And there were some concerns that, we want to get the language right and wanted to make sure what we wanted was what showed up in the bill. And it came about that we just added one little phrase, at the risk of closing, followed by or not opening. And we were hoping to articulate that the assistance that was being offered with these special grants was to help cover the needs for cash flow when a place is opening, or to cover cash flow, or to fill in a hole to prevent a center from closing. There it is.
All right. So do people have any questions? And if you want to see where this is inserted, because it's difficult to see that on the amendment because it doesn't show the full context. I'm going to refer you to what date here? Thursday, April 24th. Why don't you open up Thursday, April 24th? Okay. Thursday. Previous. Okay, and then under Katie's name, House Committee on Human Services report is the version of the bill that we passed out of committee. Come on, open up. No, pretty slow. Okay, and then you can see subdivision A, little a, 1, big A, which is right there in section 1.
Okay, got it.
Okay,
And where?
Line 12.
Good, I'm glad you said that. Thank you.
okay, so it just makes it, so the sentence would now read, the Commissioner for Children and Families may reserve up to 0.5% of the Child Care Financial Assistance Program funds for extraordinary financial relief. I'm surprised the rest of the AHS hasn't required you to change that term. To assist child care programs that are at risk of closing or not opening. That is what's being inserted. And that is consistent with further on when the department had asked for the flexibility to be able to assist either those ones that have not quite yet opened due to some, extraordinary event, or those that are closing, or who are in financial stress. So I think that is, makes it absolutely clear, and appreciate your committees. And what was your committee's vote on that?
It's 11-0.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone supported that. And we wrestled with it a lot. And I think part of it is, from my perspective, I'm a former childcare and after school provider and an administrator. So I know most of us run on a shoestring, and it doesn't take much of a disruption to put us on the edge. So something like this, help needs to be timely. And I think this provides for those accommodations.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any other questions for Representative Murwicki? Okay, let's.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a straw poll on this amendment. So can I see by a show of hands those in favor of the amendment by House Appropriations? Okay, that is 10-0-1 for Representative Cole.
Hope the rest of your day goes diesel.
Probably not, but thank you.
Thanks for that.
Okay, now we have Deputy Commissioner McLaughlin here to give us her thoughts about the amendment that we were speaking of earlier, being offered by Representative Holcomb. Welcome and thank you for your ability to be here on a short time frame. I appreciate that.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. So again, Janet McLaughlin, Deputy Commissioner in the Department for Children and Families, overseeing the Child Development Division. And one of the things that we do there, right, is co-administer universal pre-kindergarten along with the Agency of Education, in addition to sort of all things childcare and children's integrated services. So I sent over sort of short, relatively short testimony that I'm happy to read. I might add some as I go.
I appreciate that. We just barely got it here,
Yeah.
on our page, so it'd be great if you could read this.
Yes. So right, overall, right, we do share the goal of making sure that, all Vermont children enter into kindergarten with the benefit of a high quality pre-kindergarten education experiences that have been delivered in a cost-effective manner. But we are not supportive of the proposed amendment by Representative Crum. And we've got a few reasons for that. So the first is that it is really premature to make some decisions about state fiscal year 27 funding, given where we are right now, even in the budgeting process for FY 26, as well as some of the uncertainty, especially on the federal funding side of things. While it's still early days, really, of the childcare childcare contribution special fund. We do think it's unlikely that it would have enough revenue sufficient to cover universal pre-kindergarten for all students who attend community-based, so the private or nonprofit pre-kindergarten programs over time. We also do see this as a pretty significant design change to the program, and it really is premature to make those design changes without consideration of the broader goals of the universal pre-kindergarten program. And especially when we're thinking about where you guys are thinking deeply about changes to the educational framework and the funding structure associated with that, with public education in the state. So, we have already started thinking about what are the changes that would strengthen pre-kindergarten education, and that was with Act 76 and with the pre-K committee, though I know it did not get as far as all of us would have liked it to get. But any changes to the design of pre-K should really be within that wider context. And then I have a couple thoughts down below of why I feel like this is a relatively significant change. I did listen to the testimony this morning with the walkthrough with Ledge Council earlier today. So I think my bullet point 3 here is not relevant to the current amendment right now. Yes, right. So this is right. So that was, and so that's been removed because I do think it is important to just recognize that universal pre-kindergarten and childcare financial assistance they do work together to support families who need full-time care for their kids. And that's in both public and private settings, right? Because if you go to even if you're getting pre-K in a public school, you might then be getting CCFAP for your after school or for the wraparound care hours, even in a public setting. So it's that's not by setting, both in all settings, you could access both as long as it's a pre-K provider. And then next point, that processing, enrollment, and payments for the majority of children enrolled in universal pre-kindergarten would really be a significant new undertaking for the division. There are a lot of children who are enrolled in universal pre-kindergarten in private programs who do not take part in childcare financial assistance. So there are some, and I can totally see, like, for those folks, like the streamlined efficiency for that could be figured out, with enough time and to figure out. But there's really, there are families who are not eligible, right, for childcare financial assistance because there are the income requirements as well as service need requirements, right? So there are people who don't, the service need, right, being work or primarily being work or school, and there are people who don't qualify based on service needs, right? And it might be that they're taking care of other younger children, right? and they still want and need that a pre-K experience for their kid, for their older children. And so they're just that, it would be a whole new set of families to engage with DCF. If DCF were to start processing pre-K payments for those in private programs. And so I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm just saying we should do that planfully. And the final point I want to make is just around the fact that this is, I understand this, it is an administrative change, but it really is it can be really seen as a programmatic change. You know, pre-K is, as it's currently designed, really builds partnerships between the school districts, the families, and the community-based or private pre-K programs. And if some kids are going through DCF and some kids are going through their school district, that partnership, there's would be like very likely lost. I'm sure there's some school districts that would still figure out how to do it really well, but that would be really lost. And the one of the things that I know was in Act 76, it is something that's important to you, Chair, is the fact that this would really, it would be hard to see who would be responsible for making sure that kids did get pre-kindergarten education if some of the kids are going through one system and some of the kids are going through the other system. And I also think it's programmatically, it's something to really think about, because having 3-year-olds enroll through their school districts, that lets those school districts know who's coming for kindergarten, who needs the early childhood special education services, who do they maybe want to, who are their families that they really should be steering towards one program or another based on what they know about what that child's and family's needs are. And then it also helps the schools know what to expect when those children are transitioning into kindergarten, and just gives them a lot more information to help with kindergarten as well. So I know it's could be considered just an administrative change or sort of like a funding source change, but ultimately I think it would be pretty significant design change to pre-K that should be really considered within the broader changes for pre-K and broader changes for public education.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Go ahead, Representative Steady.
Besides the disconnect with the school and DCF, would you see a potential for needing additional staffing to even make this happen at a more expense?
Certainly, I guess the question is the extent to which it would be just a cost shift versus a more money, right? So certainly DCF would need some additional staff people to enroll that many children and answer parents' questions and, do that work.
Where are they going to get the money?
Yeah. But the schools would also, I mean, it's right now, schools are paying for staff to do the work of doing that enrollment and coordinating. So theoretically, maybe
know
those
that.
schools would have a little less to do if DCF was doing that. So it could just be a cost shift, but certainly
I was talking about
DCF would need more money to be able to do that.
One of the things that seemed highlighted in the amendment that actually didn't change would be the continuation of oversight and accountability by both AOE and DCF, which I'm just curious about your thoughts about that. If it were to be essentially a DCF only funded program.
Yeah. I think that I think there's a lot of benefit to having it be a shared program right now because we're bringing, I mean, the Universal Kindergarten was designed to leverage the strengths and knowledge and relationships that DCF has, as well as the strengths and knowledge and relationships that Agency of Education has. And so I think that working together, I do think that working together, it's a stronger program. I think that there are some things that we can do and those are some of the ideas that were discussed in the pre-K committee that, we just ran out of time before we were able to vote on things. And, but that could reduce some of the things that are stressful to people about around the idea that there's both AOE and DCF engaged. But I don't know that it's necessarily at the top level. I think it's really about some of the details around implementation.
Thank you. Other questions for Deputy Commissioner? So, I mean, just to summarize, while there, are things that require continued conversation, and I think that is happening. This does not look like something that DCF is in support of at this point in time.
No, and I did talk to my colleagues at the Agency of Education as well today about this, and, that,
You did?
yeah. And, in terms of it being just like premature and needing to be embedded within a broader conversation about what we're, they, concurred that now that this would be more than just this is more than just a budgeting exercise.
It's not.
This is a programmatic change.
Not just a payment.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions for Deputy Commissioner? Thank you so much, and thank you. I appreciate you being able to come on quick notice and for being very succinct in your comments here. So appreciate that very much. Ready, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, so we have heard all of the testimony, and you might have noticed that we've actually taken more testimony on amendment than we ordinarily take. I did that one because it's involved, it's a very involved program. We have the context of education reform happening right now. We have the context of Act 76, which is, at its full force and effect, but is still growing in terms of the family's enrollment and changes, and still not really, we don't know yet the federal changes that may be forthcoming in the funding for childcare assistance for families. And so I wanted to make sure we had a kind of a full picture because this was a new concept that was being floated to us. So that's why we took more testimony on this than we might ordinarily do. But we have concluded that at this point in time. And so I just opening it up for discussion and people's thoughts about how they're viewing the amendment. Yeah, go ahead, Representative McGuire. And then-
Very, very brief. Through a multitude of concerns, as you mentioned and others have mentioned, I don't support this amendment at this time. So I won't be supporting the amendment.
Doug?
I would note that while I laud the representatives' intentions with offering this and trying to alleviate some of the pressures on the ed funding in Vermont, I cannot support it at this time. And I would note that for many of the same reasons that I think the Deputy Commissioner just outlined very clearly and succinctly. So perhaps it's an issue for revisiting at a future time.
And I do want to say that this, we are and will be having
Yes.
ongoing discussions about pre-K because
Good.
it is, we have follow-up work to do on the pre-K implementation report from Act 76. And we are going to have the results of the information that JFO is going to be doing on the summer work. And I don't know what's going to happen with the ed bill. So whatever comes out of the ed bill, we will have to deal with also. So we'll be involved in all of those discussions. Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so right off the top, I think because of the ed bill and its at least work and recognition of what needs to be done and that follow-up, this is just not the right time to make a change like this. But I actually would go a little bit beyond that in terms of just philosophically. I understand the value of trying to relieve burden on property tax, but I don't think changing or responding to that, if it goes contrary to the philosophy of programming that we're doing, actually makes sense or ought to be the reason to change funding streams. And in this case, we've been building on this history that yes, childcare is important. Parents need to work. You need to be safe here. But that pre-K education is a component of the whole education system. That kids at that age need early education as part of being ready for school. It's part of the education continuum. So this is kind of like going backwards in that philosophy, saying, well, no, it's actually really childcare. So I don't support it.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Jubilee.
Yeah, no, this whole topic has been interesting and I wish we had more time to sit on it and take testimony, because what I think is actually, we're seeing that, at least in my community, is it being in the education system and all of the pressures on our ed fund, it's actually undermining our public education, our public pre-K programs that they've now, because of the constraints on the funding, our school district had to cut transportation from pre-K. They had to cut one of the days and they had to shorten the hours. So it is a real issue, and I'm glad she's kind of naming it. And so I'm looking forward to working on this more, because there's such a disparity on what's available and what you can afford, and not enough spots in general anyway. So I think it's an important part of the picture. And I wish we had been able, it had been something we'd been talking about sooner, but agree that we don't really have the time to do it right now. But look forward to those conversations next year.
Yes, for everything that's being said, I think I agree that in the sense that for me, this has flagged some basic notions about not only inequities, but also what are we focusing on here? And it feels to me like the way some things have been constructed, it looks to me like there's a lot of focus on the finances, which is important, but I'm not sure about the education that the state is committing to here. And so I'm looking forward to more discussions, because I want to dig deeper into what that looks like and feels like for all of us. Yeah.
I think through our discussions this morning and hearing the testimony, it became clear that this actually, the amendment doesn't do anything, nor was it intended to, but do anything with regard to decreasing the inequities that exist in the system already.
Right.
And so, and that, for me is just a giant one. It bothers me every day that, depending upon where you live is whether you have access or not. And,
So the educational inequities.
not okay. Yeah, it's not okay, right?
Yeah.
And
It's a flag for me, is what this has been.
and I have to tell you that we are going to be the people who have to raise that flag, because pre-K, because the education conversation is so vast and broad, pre-K oftentimes doesn't get its kind of like full due in terms of the discussions about, where this is happening. So, it's kind of like when we think about, would we ever say it was okay that, some parts of the state, seniors, there's no access for seniors, there's no 12th grade. We wouldn't think that that was okay.
Right.
And yet it's okay right now for our youngest children. And that's not,
And that goes back to it's part of our education system.
yeah.
And
It hasn't been
we've
adopted as
got
part of
to-
the education
no,
system. is
but
the-
people have to,
Yeah.
It's in this like
So it's not-
it's a semi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, are people ready for the straw poll? Okay, so could I see, by a show of hands, those people who are in favor of the amendment? Can I see, those people who are opposed to the amendment? Okay, so as many as 0, 10, 1. Okay, so the path for this will now move to education. And I know that they're going to review the testimony that we already took. They probably won't have all the same witnesses, but they're going to review the testimony that we took. It will go to Ways and Means, and then we'll make the final stop in in appropriations.
So I'm totally curious about process.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen a process before where the committee of jurisdiction for a bill votes down an amendment and it goes forward to other committees. So if they vote yes, it could be put on our bill, even though we voted against it?
That's a good question.
Because it's never happened before. Usually it's only if it passes the committee of jurisdiction, it goes on for the other committee.
Our clerk may have an answer to that question.
I have to speak very briefly to the clerk on something else. I would be glad to run down and report
Ask that
back.
question. Okay, I appreciate that.
Because it would be
Because it is a-
strange that it would be attached to a
And-
bill.
I think that the only reason that I say to education is because they would be considered to have joint jurisdiction on this issue,
But not on this bill.
not on the bill. That is true. Yeah, so Dan,
And we have had amendments come out of committees unfavorable.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
that can happen.
No, I know, but
But
it's
that's
just
a
a
bill,
matter
but
of where.
an amendment onto the bill is the question.
But the
Right,
question
right.
is whether or not, since our committee voted unfavorable on the amendment, do other committees even need to see it? Since we are not bringing it forward.
Right.
I'm happy to.
That's a good question.
Yeah, and then
Maybe-
what would be the impact if they voted favorably?
Maybe,
Yeah.
just a second, maybe, Dan, could you and Esme do that together? Because she's gonna be so that she knows what she's gonna say.
The question isn't whether it goes to, that you voted out, it goes to the committees, it's just whether the other committees even need to do a straw poll vote.
That's what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I guess that's their prerogative, right?
sure.
Is it because they had seen it before? Is that what?
Good question.
Who's is the clerk driving how this moves forward through the various committees?
I don't know the answer, no.
We're gonna find out.
We're gonna find out. Yeah. I don't mean to opine, I just thought maybe that was a different thing.
Yeah, it's not a different question. It's all the
Okay.
same. So, thank you for your attention to that, everyone. Appreciate it. So, that wraps up our official business for the day. Tomorrow, we are going to be voting on H46, which is an act relating to the Rare Disease Advisory Council. We have the revised version of that on our website yesterday, I think.
And I'll share that the health department is okay with the changes.
Yes, okay, great.
So,
Thank you.
Don't share what? Sorry.
they're okay with the changes we made.
nice on at lunch.
They were all happy. They were all happy. I know.
They're happy.
Yeah.
Yesterday's.
Yesterday's,
And they
yeah.
seemed really happy.
Yeah. And I am happy that they're willing to host it because UVM was not, and I feel like it was a good compromise.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll vote on that tomorrow. Yeah.
May I confirm, is that version 2.1 that was posted yesterday? That is incorporates yesterday morning's. Okay, just turn that around pretty quickly.
And they do that very quickly, yes.
Yes.
Last times, especially if Katie's here, she's making the changes as she is here,
So
so
it just runs through
editing.
editing.
Which we know are not infallible. Since
Yeah,
they did not
that's
get-
right.
They did not get to
She said that
that.
was-
They're all really looking at it very closely. when I'm-
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna be doing H46 tomorrow, and we will have reports out from committee members, and then we do have a witness in the afternoon. Is that confirmed, Lori? Okay, thank you. I know they've confirmed, but we have interpreters?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a witness in the afternoon that I'm just gonna, he has a particular disability. He is deaf and blind. He utilizes a special kind of interpretation. So just, some tips about asking questions. You still ask the question to the individual, and they will respond through their interpreter. And it's a different type of sign language than you may be accustomed to seeing because it involves touch. Because
Cueing?
no, it's a particular, I don't know the exact name of it, but tactile.
I haven't seen
That's why there are very few people in the state who are both deaf and blind, and so regular signing won't work for them. They need to be able to feel it. So, yeah, it's quite
Really fascinating.
fascinating. Yeah. So I just wanted to let people know that in advance. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. And I think that does it, unless anybody has any questions for right now. Okay.